Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Reliance Partners Safety Impact Teams webinar series. Today is session 2 of a 9-part series that extends into May. We're very excited about the series. I am Tom Albrecht, the Chief Revenue Officer of Reliance Partners, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. I will also be joined by Daniel Vega and Mark Barlar of Reliance Partners Safety Impact Team. Guys, welcome aboard.
Good day, Tom.
Good day, Tom.
Great to have you and great to have our audience. And I'm also excited because before I have you guys tell a little bit about your background, for the first time, we've got a sponsor. Fleetworthy is our sponsor. And before I tell the audience a little bit about that, I'm going to share our slide for today. Let's see here. Bear with me just a moment, folks. Okay. We're still welcoming in a few folks anyway. And I seem to have lost the expand. Okay, can you guys see? It's not allowing me to expand.
I could try sharing my screen if that's all right.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Sorry about that, folks. Okay. Well, as I mentioned, I'm Tom Albrecht. I'm the host for today's webinar. And Mark, go to the Fleetworthy slide. I've got a little bit to tell the audience about. Again, we're very excited. First time we've ever had a sponsor. Let me just tell you a little bit about Fleetworthy, and you see a couple of their divisions, Best Pass and DriveWise. Fleetworthy is redefining fleet readiness with the industry's only complete technology suite for fleet safety, compliance, and efficiency. We unite solutions for compliance, toll management, way station bypass, and more, thereby helping fleets simplify operations, reduce cost, and improve safety. Fleetworthy is trusted by 75% of the top fleets in North America, and they offer the most adopted toll management system and largest way station bypass network. Going beyond regulatory requirements, their compliance capabilities strengthen safety programs and enable proactive audit readiness. They support millions of vehicles, and drivers are recognized across the industry for innovation and leadership. Fleetworthy is shaping the future of fleet readiness with AI-enabled, connected fleet technology that keeps drivers safe, fleets compliant, and operations running at peak efficiency. And you can certainly learn more at fleetworthy.com. So thank you, Fleetworthy, for your involvement with today's webinar. Mark, let's go to the next slide. Okay, as a reminder, this is part 2 of a 9-part series. Our next webinar will be on November 13th, probably at 3 p.m. Eastern, and it will be around vehicle maintenance. Now, the way the series is constructed is the first 4 episodes, so through December 11th, there'll be the first 4 basics of the CSA Basics scores. And then in January, we're going to take a brief break and talk about some case studies, real life situations that Mark and Daniel have seen, things that they've helped motor carriers navigate around. And then we'll pick the series up again in February and do the last 3 basics. And then we'll conclude the series in May with a second set of case studies. So be on the lookout on all the socials, including LinkedIn, for those registration details. And of course, we have a disclaimer. This presentation and webinar are designed for educational purposes only. They are not intended to be used as legal advice. The opinions and views expressed herein are not necessarily those of Reliance Partners and belong solely to the individual contributors. So let's go to the next slide. Actually, let's go back. Sorry, Mark. And for those of you who've listened before, we do this every time because we never know who's a repeat guest and who is brand new. But I always like Mark and Daniel just to tell a little bit about themselves, your background, including what you're doing today at Reliance Partners. Mark, why don't you kick it off for us?
So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Barlar. I'm a former DOT roadside inspector retired from the Wisconsin State Patrol after 22 and a half years. I worked in the southeastern part of the state. It's an 8-lane interstate, saw 20,000 trucks bypass my location every day in between Milwaukee and Chicago. During that time, I did about 10,000 roadside inspections. I was an instructor for FMCSA for the Part A program, which is your driver's hours of service, CDL's medical qualifications, the hazardous material inspection program, and cargo tank inspection program. And for the last 6 months of the my career, I answered data queues for the state of Wisconsin. Very little I have not done when it comes to DOT roadside inspections.
That's great. Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Daniel Vega, former state trooper in Arizona. I was an inspector roughly for 10 years. Went through the Part A, the hours of service course, vehicle maintenance, hazardous material, motor coach. Um, Worked my time on the western part of Arizona, Interstate 8, Interstate 10, covered about roughly 300 miles. Around 2022, I moved to the insurance industry, working for Nationwide Insurance, helping our clients improve their safety programs and compliance, and doing the same thing for Reliance right now.
Okay, that's great. Well, we're looking forward to your insights today. Let's go to the next slide, Mark. So we've been talking about English language proficiency and more recently non-domiciled CDLs. And, we're starting to get some numbers on this. And I wanted to just share this with the audience. And as a reminder, we will take questions. Those questions can be submitted through either the chat icon or the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screens. And so we look forward to those questions. But what do we see here? So the blue line is monthly violations. The red is monthly out of service orders. And so for a 4-year period from the beginning of 2021 through the end of 2024, on average per month, there were about 775 ELP violations. During that period per month, it averaged about 117 drivers being put out of service. Once oddly enough, as we got into this year, the first 6 months of the year, even before this was a current topic, the number of violations doubled to a little over 1,500. But oddly enough, the out of service orders declined to, a negligible number. And then as we got into really late June and thereafter, we started to see a little bit more activity, jumping to almost 4,500, almost 7,400 violations, and even in September, almost 7,100. Now, CVSA said that a violation should result in an automatic out of service designation, but we're not seeing that. What we saw is in July, about 29% of the violations were put out of service, about 30 or excuse me, about 28% in August, and then about 32% in September. So it's gone up. We know it will never be 100%, even though theoretically it should be, because there are some border counties that are given some leeway in Southern California and in Texas that are important to trade, but there's still an awful big gap. We're hearing a lot about non-domiciled CDLs. We'd love to chat with you about that, anecdotes later in the program. But I do think it will be fascinating because the non-domiciled issue has certainly caused a lot of activity, some fear in the marketplace. And so at a minimum, we look forward to sharing October numbers next month. So with that in line, let's go to the next slide here. And I think, Mark, you're going to kick things off for us.
All right. Well, we're going to start off with the hours of service, and we always got to start off, with the global overview of how everything is put together. So, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, they're under the US DOT. They came up with the Compliance, Safety, and Accountability, which underneath the CSA system, you have the Safety Measurement System, which has all of your 7 basics. And today we're talking about hours of service.
So as Mark mentioned, we're going to discuss hours of service, operation of commercial motor vehicle by driver who are ill, fatigued, or non-compliance with hours of service. So what are examples of this? So no record of duty status, your 11-hour violation, 14-hour violation, your false logs, form and manner, um, everything that deals with the ELD falls under hours of service.
So the SMS analyzes the carrier's on-road performance by converting the carrier's inspection and crash data into basic measures and percentiles. So the higher your score, the worse that it is. Kind of like your golf score. You want that score as low as possible, because the lower it is, the better that it is.
So all roadside inspection violations that pertain to a basic are assigned a severity weight point value that reflects its association with crash occurrence and crash consequences. The severity weights help differentiate the levels of crash risk associated with the various violations attributed to each basic.
So the violation severity weights range on a scale from 1 to 10 for each basic, where 1 represents the lowest crash risk and 10 represents the highest crash risk relative to the other violations in that one basic. It doesn't go translate to the other 6 basics. It's just what FMCSA views as the crash potential when these violations occur. And when there's an out of service designation given to the violation, it adds an additional 2 points.
So all the on-road safety events are assigned a time weight, which decreases with time. So let's take a violation for 11 hours, 7 points. The first 6 months, that weight's going to be multiplied times 3, so it's going to be 21. From 6 to 12, it's going to be 14, and then from 12 to 24, it's only going to be 7. After those 24 months, that violations are no longer used to assess a carrier's safety posture in the SMS.
So, and to get into the alert status for hours of service, you have to hit that 65 percentile range within that basic. And that's just for your general loads that you haul. If we're a passenger carrier, it's 50%. And then that motor carrier would be in the alert. And hazardous materials carriers get a decrease of 5 percentage points, and they're at 60%. So once the that percentage gets up and hits 65 for general, 60 for hazmat, and 50 for passenger carriers, then that motor carrier goes into the alert status. And so how all of this is calculated, it's a lot different than how crashes and unsafe driving. So the basic measure is what determines where you're going to be located, your percentile within your group, and there's going to be 5 safety groups. The total points for violations, so that's everything that's listed on the inspection report that deals with hours of service, divided by the total time weight of qualifying inspections. A qualifying inspection is going to be every roadside inspection, which is a level 1, 2, 3, and a 6. So, as an example, if a company has 10 level 1 through 3 inspections over the last 4 months. Let's say 4 of those inspections happened over 12 months ago. We have 1 violation for a bill of lading number and 1 violation for having a false record of duty status. 3 inspections happened 7 months ago with no violations listed. So there's 0 total points there. And then we have 3 inspections that occurred within the last 6 months. 1 fair to transfer your ELD, 1 is going to be for a 30-minute break, and then 1 for an 11-hour violation. That's a total of 51 points with all the severity weights. The total time weight of the inspections is for the 4 point inspections 12 months ago, it's 4 points. For the 3 inspections that occurred between 6 and 12 months, it's 6. And for the 3 inspections in the last 6 months, the total is 9. So that's a total of 19 points. So the way everything is, the calculation works, your total point value for the violations that were found during the inspection times that weight value during that time frame divided by the total time weight of the qualifying inspections. That comes out to 59 points for the total inspections violations and 19 for the total time weight. This gives us a basic measure of 3.1. 3.1. Now, the relevant number of inspections, remember, they're 1 through 3 and a level 6. You're only going to get a level 6 if you're hauling transuranic waste, radiological materials, or highway route control quantities of it. Most 99.9999% of all motor carriers do not haul that type of hazardous materials. So relevant inspections for this company, they have 10 over the last 2 years. That puts them in safety group 1. If they had 20 inspections, they'd be in group 2. If they had 50 inspections over the last 2 years, they're in group 3, and so on. So now when the company, when you're within that group, with that measure, they place it within that entire group and they rank them. And then they come up with, if your measure is, say, at the 75 percentile within that group, that means 74% of the motor carriers are doing a little bit better job than the motor carrier, and 24% are doing a little bit worse. With a basic measure of 3.1 within group 1, that puts this motor carrier at about a 76 percentile range, which is in the alert status. So it's very important to know what violations are coming on board and to prevent those violations from coming on board in the future.
So who's able to do these inspections that affect your hours of service? So the officer must be certified to the level of inspection conducted. Either a level 1, a level 2, level 3, or level 6. A level 3 inspection is just driver credential and administrative only inspection. So he's only gonna look at your license, review your medical card, and your logbook information. Level 2 is a walk around. It's the driver and vehicle inspection. It includes a level 2. And then you have a level 1, which is a full inspection. It includes a level 2 and 3. And then you got your level 6. So it's a level 1 inspection when transuranic waste and HRCQ loads of radioactive material.
Those motor carriers that get level 6s, they know who they are. If you're not sure if you're going to get a level 6, you never get a level 6. That's a guarantee. So only violations listed on a qualifying inspection report will affect the motor carrier's basic measure. If a driver receives a citation or warning but no inspection report, the citation warning will not affect the motor carrier's basic measure in the SMS. It doesn't. If the violation listed on an inspection report is not listed in FMCSA, CSA, SMS methodology Appendix A, then the violation doesn't have a point value and will not affect the motor carrier's basic measure. So you have to have a qualifying inspection report for it to affect the measure. And just about every inspection that is going to be conducted at roadside is going to include a level 3.
So as we could see, out of the top 10 violations, 4 account for either exceeding the maximum limitation or falsifying not having a log or ELD. So we see that false report of driver's record of duty status. There's 266,170 inspections, and there's 365,643 violations. Then we have no record of duty status. ELD required. That's when you're decide, hey, you know what, I'm gonna use paper log, or you don't have a valid ELD. Then we have your driving beyond 14 hour. You could only work 14 hours before having to take a valid rest period. And then we have 11 hours where you can only drive 11 hours before you have to take a valid rest period as well.
Now, when we're looking at these numbers, you see the number of inspections that lists one of these types of violations. And you kind of think to yourself, how can we have more violations than the number of inspections that lists this? Well, the way that officers are trained, if you have a false log for day 1 out of 8 days, day 2 out of 8 days, and day 5 out of 8 days, the officer can list all three of those violations separately because they occurred on separate days. So I just wanted to expound on that a little bit because you're going to see that with just about every type of violation. With the number of inspections, there will be more number of violations than number of inspections. And that could also occur due to co-drivers being in the vehicle as well. So, how do we fix some of these violations, right? Number one, cited violation for hours of service is record of duty status, general form and manner. This has not changed in the 27 years that I've been in the trucking industry since 1998. It's always been form and manner. Now, form and manner is all about bill of lading numbers, trailer numbers, listing your co-drivers. When it was paper logs, it had everything. Was the log legible? Did you put down the company name? Did you add up the number of hours that you were in each duty status? Did you put down the city and state for each change of duty status? All of that is recorded into the record of duty status general form and manner category. And that's why there's so many of those violations. Um, it's almost double the number of violations for the second most cited violation of false report of duty status. So, how do we fix this? Well, we got to constantly monitor our drivers. We got to make sure that they certify their logs every day. We got to make sure that they're changing up their bill of lading numbers when they drop off a load, get a new load. They list their co-driver. They change up the trailer numbers when they're dropping trailers and getting another trailer. We got to constantly look and see what our drivers are doing to ensure that they're doing the right things. And then it all comes down to training. Hey, driver, I see that you had the same bill of lading number for the last 7 days. Did you pick up another load during that time? If so, let me know what that bill of lading number is, and we can edit your log, which is allowed, to show the correct bill of lading number that should be there.
So hours of service, rods falsifications, as we see, it's one of the top violations. So shut down the use of PC and only allow it when it meets FMCSA guidance. Do not use ELD providers known to edit ELD source files. And compare rods with BLs, fuel receipts, and other supporting documents to ensure proper logging. So this is really big when you're trying to correct your hours of service. Basic is auditing your logs, if you can daily, and train your drivers of when PC is allowed. The biggest thing we would see is they're taking advantage of trying to get closer to their destination, to deliver that load on time. At least for me when I was doing inspections. Or I would inspect people that would pass 6 or 7 truck stops and then continue driving because they were full. So just talk with your drivers, issue training on PC of when it's allowed and when it's not. It's going to go a long way to helping improve your hours of service, basically.
Yeah, there's a lot of ELD systems out there that you can run a report on drivers who use um, personal conveyance or have unidentified driving in their logs, and you sort those out and you talk to the drivers that use it the most, and you have a conversation with them. Say, what did you use personal conveyance for this? Why were you not logged into your ELD and the vehicle moved 120 miles? And then if we find that yeah, that there was a mistake made by the driver, the motor carrier can edit the driver's log and push those edits out to the driver. Now, when you do that, the driver has to accept those edits, and it may end up showing an hours of service violation. But what motor carriers don't understand is The officer can write a falsification, add those hours in that are missing, and still write the hours of service on top of that. So it's something to be aware of. And there is no problem with editing of a log. You just can't edit out drive time. It's strictly prohibited. You can't do it for any reason unless you have co-drivers that made a mistake, and then you can switch hours in between the co-drivers. And let's say that there is a mistake that was done and there's falsification. You don't ever want our driver to get stopped and inspected and have it found during roadside. Have that driver take a vacation for 8 days. The officers can only look back for that day and the previous 7. Once that 8th day rolls off, they will not see that mistake in the logbook that long ago. And then everything new is new.
As a carrier, you guys have all the information officers are going to review during the roadside inspection. They're going to be comparing your BOLs, your fuel receipts. That's what I would do to try to get falsifications. Is you just compare to their location, especially now with E-rods. When you load it up, when you put the officer's code and send it to E-rods, and when they open it up, it literally shows them every time that vehicle is moving and the mileage. So if there's mileage that's an off duty that's missing, that's pretty easy. He's gonna have questions for your driver. So it's a little bit harder to get by without that officer catching that nowadays. I mean, with paper log is a little bit easier, but now just have to look at a screen, move your mouse over the dots, and it tells you the location and mileage.
It does. So, hours of service, we're still working with the falsification. Review the rods to ensure the driver is not operating in exempt mode. Exempt mode would be, let's say we're doing an agricultural move, and we can be exempt if we're operating within 150 air miles, but yet we still want our drivers to have an ELD in case they don't meet the 4 things that are required for the 150 air mile radius exemption for not having a log. That's when you use exempt mode. But for the most part, the motor carriers on here today will never use that exempt mode. Review rods to ensure the ELD is recording the required data each hour the vehicle is in motion. So there are some ELDs out there that you can switch from an ELD mode over to a logging app mode or over to an AOBRD. That's the old electronic log regulations that are still in effect and you can still use when you're exempt from an ELD. So when a ELD switches from that ELD mode over to a logging app or the AOBRD mode, it's no longer required to record the location, engine hours, and odometer each hour that that vehicle is in motion. So when you start seeing things like that, where it's not recording those 1 hour intermittent locations, that driver is no longer operating with an ELD. Review your routes for the proper recording of odometer and engine hour information with each change of duty status. The logging application, the AOBRD, doesn't require that as well. So if you're just seeing a driver go into drive mode, they're 5 hours in, they go off duty in a different location. There's no intermittent pings of location with odometer information. There's no odometer information for each change of duty status. That that logging application is not an ELD at that point. And officers are getting better and better at recognizing that. So just be aware of it when you're doing your reviews. These are some of the things that you want to look for to make sure that we stay compliant with our hours of service. And again, if we find a driver that is not operating their device in ELD mode, put them on vacation for 8 days. It goes from Tuesday to Tuesday when they look back, Wednesday to Wednesday, Saturday to Saturday. That's how far they can look. If they get stopped on Saturday, they can go all the way back and inspect the previous Saturday's logs. So we give our driver that time off. The officer will not see that it was not operating in ELD mode, and violations can't be recorded for that during a roadside inspection. Audits are completely different. They go back 6 months if they want to.
So how do we improve, or what can we do to fix exceeding hours of service limitations, and we kind of touched on it already a little bit, but run a report every day for the 11 and 14 hour. If discovered, give them 8 days off. That way, when they do get inspected, they're not gonna be in violation. Or train your drivers how to properly use a split sleeper berth, as they can extend the 14-hour driving window. It has to be 7 hours in the sleeper at minimum, in the sleeper, not off duty. And 2 or 3 either off duty or in the sleeper. This is big because the ELDs, they're not counting that 2 or 3 hour period. So if your drivers don't know how to use that and they go off duty, say they get home, they go off duty at 10 at night, and they don't have a period to connect with, you're going to be in violation when you turn that ELD back on. So make sure that they're counting their hours and making sure they have something to bridge with if you're going to be using the split sleeper. That's why, if you know how to use it, use it. If you don't know how to use it, it's a little bit confusing for some drivers. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, seriously, if you don't know how to use it, contact myself or Daniel. We have training programs that explains this in detail, and we can walk you through step by step on good uses and not good uses of that split sleeper berth, and why it can be so advantageous on top of it. So, ELD required items, they're the was it the 5th and the 10th most cited violations? And I I would have normally put these two together, but they're two different ones, and there's actually 4 things that are actually needed for every ELD device that's in the vehicle. Um, the way I explain it to motor carriers, keep all the items in one place. When I was doing inspections, I thought it was great when motor carriers put their registration, their IFTA, their insurance, all the required information up front when it comes to the vehicle and registration. When ELDs came into being, I thought it would be a great idea if they just did the same thing and put it all the way at the back. Open up the front, go to the back. Here's all our ELD information. We need the manual for the ELD. That is probably going to change here in probably a year. We won't need the ELD, but right now we still do. The instruction sheet for how to do a transfer with the ELD, the malfunction instruction sheet, and then your 8 blank logbook pages. I recommend having it in paper. It can be in electronic, but the driver's got to be able to show it to the officer. So it's best to have, if you're going to use electronic, use both paper and electronic. Because when drivers get stopped, they get nervous, and when anybody gets nervous, it's hard for them to recall things, especially when they were trained a year ago and they've never had to look for it again. So keep it in paper form and electronic app if you use that as well. And we train the drivers where we keep that information. And then every now and then ask our drivers to show you their ELD documents periodically. Every phone now pretty much has a FaceTime, has was it a Duo, and was it I have Duo on my phone because I use Android. So get on a video call with them and say, hey, show me in your permit book where your ELD documents are, and call out all 4 periodically. These are some of the most cited violations, and each individual item out of that 4 is 1 point apiece. So if our driver can't locate all 4 of those items, it's going to be 4 total points. But it's not 4 total points for the first 6 months. It's 12 points. And that really hits hard. For hours of service. And we'll explain why it hits harder than most other violations in all the other basics versus the hours of service at the end here.
So if you're getting violations for not being able to transfer your log, you could train your drivers or have your drivers show you how to transfer the log. So for the output file, the comment, you use any wording, letters, and numbers you desire. No one's going to see it. That ELD should tell you that the transfer was successful. So when we're roadside, the officer is going to say, hey, input my code, which if you're in Arizona, it's going to be AZ, the number. You're going to hit transfer. It should say it was successfully sent. If it doesn't transfer, then there might be an issue. Now, if there's internet issues, you can't transfer it because of the internet, then there's some guidance that you may be able to remove it if they still write the violation. But the biggest thing here is for that driver to know how to transfer it when you get inspected. Also, if for some reason you don't input your license on some of the ELDs, your license number, it's not going to transfer. So.
Yeah, very important for drivers to be able to do this, and you can actually have drivers do this without even being inspected. And you can do it. Let's say you're the safety person for the company and your last name is, say, Vega. You can have them put the file comment down as Vega. In the state of Wisconsin, it was WI and then your officer number. Arizona, Daniel was saying it's AZ and probably their badge number, right? Nobody is going to look at those logs that you upload because you have to do a search for it. Now, is there a way for a person to look at it? Yeah, but they're not going to know what they're looking at. They may know the company, but they have no idea what they're doing. And leaves out of the system in about a week, maybe a little bit longer. They do get periodically purged from the system. FMCSA doesn't say what that time frame is, but I've gone back in when I was still working with the State Patrol. I would look at it a week later. It might be there, it might not. 2 weeks, they were always gone. The only time they stay there any longer is if they put certain types of coding in for audits, and then they'll stay in there a little bit longer. So hours of service rods are not current. Now, normally when this happens, these are for drivers using paper logs or non-compliant ELDs operating as e-logs, a logging application, or an AOBRD. ELDs should be up to date all the time. Now, officers may make a mistake, and we need to read what the officer puts down on the inspection report before we go off and do a data queue and say, hey, Mark and Daniel says that ELDs are up to the second. They should never get a violation for record of duty status not current. Read what the officer put down. They might put down that the log was false and they just do record of duty status wasn't current. This is a 5-point violation and most likely not out of service. A falsification is 7 points. We don't want to interrupt the officer when they're making a mistake in our favor, right? So we let them go ahead and make the mistake. We'll eat that violation. If it's if our driver did do a falsification, we don't want to do a data queue because they can add that violation onto the inspection when you do a data queue. Pennsylvania is notorious for that. So just know that the logs need to be current to the last change of duty status, and this all comes down to training. Since this violation is normally associated with paper logs, we got to train our drivers. No matter what you're doing, you stop in, get gas. It is on duty, not driving, and right before you start driving, you go up to the drive line. The last entry that every driver should have during an inspection should be driving. Now, let's say they get to a scale facility and they say, go ahead and park, driver. Well, the first thing that driver should be doing is updating his log to showing that he just got parked at the scale. So he never has that violation. And it'll give you a couple of minutes for that driver to bring his log up to date. There is no regulation stating that an officer has to give a driver 15 minutes or allow them any time to bring their logs up to date. I was famous for coming out of the scale, jumping up at the driver's door, grabbing that log from him, and say, go ahead and have a park over here in the parking lot off to the right. I will meet you out there in a few minutes.
So portable ELDs required to be secured to the vehicle and visible to the driver while seated in the driver's seat. Do not mount on the windshield, lay on dash, lay on lap, or put on seat or hold in hand. Utilize a company tablet for the ELD with specific mounts. So this is a very common violation. Drivers just, you open the door and the ELD is on the passenger seat or on the floor. So just leave it in the mount until they approach you, and then once they approach you, they're going to ask you for all that information. Give it to him so he can inspect it. But just make sure it is mounted and visible, not in the cup holder, not on the dash, not on the floor.
Never give that officer a reason to give you a violation. Let's say a driver had it in the dash, and we have a video showing this, right? Literally got this not too long ago. The driver takes it out of the mount, is messing with the ELD, probably putting himself in on-duty not driving status, and lays it on the dash. The officer then comes up, is at the passenger side door, gets his information, and writes a violation for not having the ELD mounted to the dash. That officer never saw it in its holder. Now, the way our ELDs are required to work, don't do anything with it when you get an inspection. Don't touch it unless you need to update some information in there. If everything is updated, like you're certified, you got the correct bill of lading, you got the correct unit number, don't touch it, because the ELD is required after 5 minutes to notify you and say, hey, your vehicle stopped moving. Do you want me to put you to on duty not driving? And if the driver does nothing for the next minute, after the 6 minute, it puts that driver into on duty not driving status automatically. It does it automatically. It's a requirement for the ELD. Driver doesn't have to touch it. So let the ELD do its business. Or at least don't pull it out of the holder until the officer the gets to the door. Or let's say, oh, our driver made a mistake. He had it laying on the seat. When you park, put it in the holder. Put it in the holder and let the officer figure things out from there.
Before we go to the last slide, guys, I want to remind the audience that we are taking questions. There is kind of a two-part question in the queue, and we'll be getting to that momentarily.
All right. So when it comes to hours of service, can we do data queues for hours of service? Of course we can. Officers make mistakes. ERODS doesn't calculate some things correctly. There are definitely things that can be done. If the violation didn't exist and we have proof of it, including video evidence, such as it was mounted to the dash, our driver took it out after he stopped to put some information in there, then we can do a data queue to have that violation removed. Let's say the violation coding is incorrect and the correct coding has a lesser point value. So let's say an 11-hour violation versus an 11-hour nominal violation. And if you're unfamiliar with the nominal violation is, that means it's less than 15 minutes of the driver driving in the 11-hour violation. At 11 hours, 15 minutes or more, it's a full 7-pointer, where that nominal violation is 1 point. And that's very important. You can do that with the 14-hour violation as well. They have that nominal violation listed in there. If there's a citation issued, you cannot do a data queue directly to the state when there's a citation involved. We have to go to court for it. So if you're not working with a citation program, you can get a hold of Daniel and I, and we make recommendations on some programs that can do that. And if we do make those recommendations and they don't do right by you, let us know too, because I don't like giving out bad information to companies that don't follow through on what they say that they're going to do. So we also need to remember that when you upload your ELD, it goes into a system that then gets downloaded into a program called ERODS by the officer. The program that enforcement uses to review ELDs lists every 11, 14-hour, if it's a 60-hour or 70-hour, it'll list those as well, and 30-minute break violation everywhere in that logbook. Everywhere. All they have to do is click on one tab and it'll list every violation, obvious 11, 14, 70, or 30-minute break violation. The program doesn't calculate split sleep or berth violations for the 14-hour clock correctly. It also can't do, since it doesn't get information from day 9, it takes the information from, normally it's midnight on day 8 and moves forward. So it can't see day 9, in which we are utilizing a good split sleeper berth on that. So the way do we look at those is if there's a violation on day 8 for the 14th, we look at the 9th day and we say, hey, there's a good split sleeper. We can do those data queues. So review the logs for accuracy often. Every motor carrier required to use an ELD. This is where it the point values, it only takes a few violations to get into the alert. And the reason for that is every motor carrier that's using an ELD is competing with motor carriers that operate within a 150 air mile radius. Those are called the short haul operations. Those drivers need nothing in their possession for hours of service. They don't need a timesheet. They don't need an ELD. They don't need the documents for the ELD. They don't need to certify anything. The only things that they need to do is to ensure they put down their start time, their end time, and how many hours they worked for that day. The motor carrier keeps proof of that for the previous 6 months. The driver doesn't, it goes back to the work reporting location every day and is released from work within 14 hours of their start time. And then they have 10 hours off in between the time that they end work and start work the next day. And then you have that they operate within 150 air miles of their work reporting location. They meet those 4 items. They don't need anything for hours of service. But yet, their number of inspections, let's say they have 50 dump trucks operating right around Milwaukee. And we got a company that does long haul out of Chicago. They have 50 inspections. The dump truck operation doesn't need any hours of service, but yes, this long haul company does, and they get violated 3 or 4 times. We're still competing with that dump truck company that needs nothing. You have nothing needs to be provided at roadside unless they don't meet the short haul operation. It's kind of unfair, in my opinion, but that's how everything works within the hours of service. So things to be aware of. And that's why every violation when it comes to hours of service, nothing else of the 7 basics affects it like this or is calculated that way, or the only one that may be a different would be unsafe driving, where they take out combination vehicles, and then you have versus straight trucks type companies. They do break those out, but that's about it.
All right, guys, why don't we shift to the questions? Actually, one of you guys, you want to take a look at that? Let's advance the screen to your contact information as well, which I think is slide 28, 28 or 29. Yep. And I know some folks may be a little shy about asking a question in a webinar format. So you've got Mark and Daniel's emails and cell phone numbers there. While you guys are contemplating the question from this individual, I was just kind of curious relative to personal conveyance. We know that can be abused, but are there sort of a set of best practice guidelines around time limit or the types of personal conveyance that you know are totally legit that you see your best operators operating around? I mean, just any kind of common sense principles there.
Mark already pulled it up, so
He's quick with the draw.
Well, I kind of knew that these questions were coming. When it comes to personal conveyance, only allow it when, and I'm going to zoom in on this, one page, no page width. Only do it when it complies with FMCSA's guidance on what a good use of personal conveyance is. Time spent traveling from a driver's en route lodging to restaurants and entertainment facilities. Commuting between the driver's terminal and his or her residence, between trailer drop lots and the driver's residence, and between work sites and his or her residence. Take the work sites out of there. Those are for like your construction companies and not for motor carriers that haul property for hire. You cannot go from shipper receiver to home. You cannot go shipper receiver to the motor carrier. You can never do that. The only way that you could is if your location of the motor carrier or your drop lot is that place where you normally do your deliveries. There's a company, say in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. It's a hazmat facility. They have all the trailers there. So the driver picks up the trailers from there, goes, delivers the loads, drops the trailer back off from there, and then goes home. That you can use a personal conveyance for. But you can't, because that becomes the drop lot. And we can explain those things because with the ELDs, it has GPS coordinates. So they can show we're dropping here every night. Driver goes home, driver comes back, and he goes and does his route the next day, does the same thing day in, day out. Drop lots are drop lots where you drop your vehicle and then you go home and you come back in, you come back and pick up the vehicle. Now, a driver can go from the terminal to home, the motor carrier terminal to home, and he can drive with the vehicle, with trailer attached, not a problem, and then go back to the terminal, gets his instructions for his next load on that Monday, and then go ahead and deliver it. Do not do this because officers will not allow it. Do not say, all right, I'm going from my terminal here, I'm going home, and then I'm going to go personal conveyance to my next pickup on Monday. Don't do that. The officers will look at it, they'll see it, they'll say you were dispatched, and then they'll write it up as a log falsification. So, time spent traveling to a nearby reasonable safe location to obtain rest after loading or unloading. Time driving under personal conveyance must allow the driver adequate time to obtain the required rest in accordance with minimum off-duty periods. So, you get loaded, you get unloaded, you can drive from that loading unloading point to the nearest place to obtain rest. Nearest place to obtain rest. Don't pass up a truck stop. Don't pass up a place where you can park, grab some food and whatnot. You got to go to the nearest one. And if it's in the opposite direction, you have to go in the opposite direction. Companies and drivers may feel, well, this is on the way. Nobody will ever know. Let me tell you, officers have Google Maps. They will look and see where you
Or
picked up. I used it all the time. Said, look, there's a truck stop 5 miles the other way. You should have went there. Now, moving a
Uh,
CV3, I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, I was going to say we've got a couple more questions that have come into the Q&A box and the chat box. Why don't I handle the first one that's in the Q&A about non-domiciled CDLs? And I might ask the person who submitted the question, you said it was out of service. I don't think you guys alluded to that. I think what we were talking about on slide 4, well, if we just go back to September 26th, DOT Secretary Sean Duffy had a press conference announcing basically there's going to be much tighter scrutiny over non-domiciled CDLs in their audit of several states. I wasn't sure if it was all 50 or enough that they had trustworthy numbers, but they identified approximately 194,000 truck drivers who are non-domiciled, meaning their primary residence is not in the United States. So it could be in Mexico, it could be Canada, it could be overseas. We know a lot of drivers come over, they get a work authorization for 6 months, they may go back home, whatever the circumstances. So it's really a driver whose primary residence is not in the US. And so there's been some complaints for several years now. I think probably more related to the Mexican B1 drivers, and certainly not all drivers are this way. We don't want to ever paint broad strokes against any driver group, but where drivers were coming in and maybe not adhering to the cabotage laws. They'd start in Monterey and, across the border, they'd go to Chicago. They're allowed to pick up another load after that delivery, so long as that next load is international. So there's been some frustrations within the industry. So basically, the industry said, you know what? We're going to phase out over the next 2 years all but 6,000 of the 194,000 non-domiciled CDLs. And so that's the spirit of that. I don't know if that answers that individual's question. On the ELP, when that was announced on April 28th, and then 3 days later, CVSA said that a lack of English proficiency would automatically be an out of service order and not just a violation. It could be that the person asking the question was referencing that. I'm not 100% sure. But the reason there is a gap is not all states are enforcing the out of service component of that. Um, and the legitimate reasons would be a couple of counties in Texas and a couple in California do get some additional latitude because they're important to cross-border business, but otherwise it reflects a lack of compliance. So let me see if there's a follow-up there. Angie has a question, and then we do want to get to this other one that the first person's had in the queue longer than anyone, but I'll ask Angie's question. If I have a driver 15 minutes from our yard that dropped at a construction site and runs out of time, yet our yard is closer than any hotel, can that driver exercise personal conveyance to get back to the yard?
So that's a really good question. There's a little bit of gray area here because it specifically states that that is not a good use of personal conveyance. Because they do say these are the things that are good, and here are the things that are not. Um, Time spent traveling to a motor carrier's terminal after loading or unloading from a shipper or receiver, right here, number 7, specifically states that you can't do it. Can you make the argument this is the closest place to obtain rest? You can make that argument. You absolutely can make that argument. Will the officer agree with that argument? Don't know. Maybe, maybe not. If a violation is written, then you can do a data queue. Will every state then take that violation off? It depends on the person who's answering the data queue. You would think that this would be uniform all across the country, that this would be okay because they're going to drive actually a shorter distance to get them home. But it specifically states that it can't be done in FMCSA's guidance. So if you want to go by the letter of FMCSA, you can't do it.
And we could spend a little more time on that, but we're down to the last 5 minutes or so. Can one of you guys take the question in the
I wanted to add, I don't know if, for that
yep.
non-domicile city out of service. If they're not just, I want to add something to that. If they're not meeting all the requirements for that state, they're going to get downgraded. It's going to be revoked, their license. And if they're still operating, the inspector's going to run that through SIDLIS, and it's going to say revoked. So you're going to be put out of service for not having a valid license.
Right. You're not getting put out for not having for having a non-domiciled. That license has to be revoked or taken away on some sort for that. So we have a question in the webinar chat that says, hey, how can I get information on compliance related questions? Get a hold of Daniel or I. Our contact information was in the PowerPoint. You can also do business with Reliance Partners, and then you get access to Daniel and I. So you contact Reliance Partners, obtain your insurance, say, hey, can I talk to Daniel and Mark? Sure. And we'll get you.
But we also put your information out there, even if you're not a client. We wouldn't have done that because we know from time to time folks do want to reach out, and that may be the first step towards having a relationship with Reliance. But you're here to help. You might want to show that screen again as well. And then let's see, Daniel. Let's see here. If the on-duty status was edited and driving status was not, can the inspector give a falsification of the log?
I would ask, why was it edited? I mean, because it has to accurately reflect what you're doing at the end of the day. I mean, it's going to be based on each officer or if they're going to write a falsification or not. Say, for example, you're supposed to be in the sleeper berth or off duty and you're actually on duty. It depends what you're doing at the end of the day, but it has to accurately reflect what you're doing.
Yeah. As long as it does that, you're fine with doing an edit in a log. Drivers do make mistakes. I mean, drivers will go home on a Friday, they'll keep themselves on duty all weekend,
Yeah.
even though they're not driving. Absolutely, you can edit that. In the webinar chat, how will the out of service work for non-English speaking drivers? What do they need to do if they get placed out of service? For what is the resolution? The resolution is it's on the driver. It's on their own personal recognizance to say, hey, yeah, I can speak English well enough to respond to official inquiries now. There's nothing that is required to be done other than the driver learns English well enough to be able to read and speak well enough to respond to official inquiries. Is it a good idea to send them to an English as a second language course? Absolutely, it is. I do some classes. I partner with some agencies to do mock inspections with drivers, and I used to enforce this law for 22 years through all its iterations, not out of service from 98 to '05, out of service from '05 to 15, and then pretty much taken out of the regulations almost that says you can't really enforce it from 2016 until 2020 when I retired. So I do those mock inspections and I give my opinion. Yeah, this driver should be okay. But again, foreign drivers, English is their second language. They could be good today, and in 2 weeks they start forgetting things. I took Spanish for years in high school. I know how to ask for the bathroom, say thank you and please. So you
Yeah,
gotta you gotta use it to stay proficient at it.
and every state might be asking different questions at the end of the day. They're not all going to be the same questions for every inspection. I've worked with a company that already had multiple drivers put out of service twice. So they got put out of service. They thought they were good, went back on the road, got inspected in a different state, and then got put out of service again. So it's not going to be the same questions or the same road signs all the time. So just make sure you are aware of that.
Well, and I think the spirit of that question from Debbie also comes from, as we know that there's an increased emphasis on truck inspections right now, which automatically opens the door to see whether a driver is proficient in English. And then very quickly, there's going to be a check on the non-domiciled status. I would say we've heard of a lot of trucking associations at both the state level and some in some of the larger communities like Laredo, where they've been sponsoring ESL or English as second language classes. Fleets can do that. There's oftentimes people in a community that taught a class on ESL at a college, regular university or community college. They're often willing to be hired for a week to help your drivers get proficient. But it will become rusty if not used regularly. So we encourage dispatch, other managers to make sure that they're helping those drivers stay proficient. A second question has come in. Do we have to annotate every on-duty segment of the day?
No. The easy answer to that is no. But every special driving category that you use, say yard move, personal conveyance, if you're going to use the agricultural exemption, if you're going to use adverse driving conditions, any exemption that you're going to try and do, you have to annotate the log for the reasons why. And it can't be, I'm going to use personal conveyance, and they put down personal conveyance. They gotta give the reason why. Going to the nearest place to obtain rest, going to obtain food from. Those are the required annotations that need to happen.
I wouldn't put food 10 times or 15 times, traveling to get food 15 times, because it's not gonna work out very good.
Yeah. Yeah, go to the dentist at that point. You have to go to local CVS. I want to go back on that one gentleman, and I think this will probably be the last question, that did ask about he had gotten the new MC DOT number. Where can he go to get questions answered. And I know we talked about your guys' availability, but if that person doesn't take advantage of that, what else would you recommend? I mean, because I think sometimes people would be afraid to ask a regulator, like, uh-oh, they might be looking to get me, when all I have is an honest question.
There's some states, I mean, not a lot of states are doing those voluntary inspections anymore. There are some states out there. I mean, I would recommend reaching out to your closest DOT inspection site in Virginia and see if they might be able to help.
Yeah. And again, Mark and Daniel are available. There's their contact information. As we wrap this up, I do want to say thank you to our sponsor, Fleetworthy. Fleetworthy works with millions of vehicles and drivers for compliance, toll management, way station bypass, and so much more. They help fleets simplify their operations, reduce cost, and improve safety. And that's what we're all about here. It's a great company. Years ago, when I did consulting, their DriveWise division came up quite a bit, but they've added a lot to their portfolio. So we want to thank them for their participation in sponsoring this today. Mark and Daniel, thank you so much. Thanks to our audience. Those of you that signed up for this today, in the next few days, you'll be getting a copy of today's slides. Stay tuned for next month, vehicle maintenance, and we look forward to that conversation. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.